Russia has a fighter jet that they call the best fifth-generation fighter in the world. A jet promoted as a direct counter to America's F-22 and F-35, designed to dominate the skies in any conflict. But for more than 4 years of war in Ukraine, that jet has never once appeared on the battlefield. Instead, Russia moved it to Chelyabinsk, an industrial region deep inside Russian territory, closer to Kazakhstan than to the front lines, more than 1,700 kilometers from the battlefield. And for many years, that strategy seemed to work. Distance was the shield, ambiguity was the weapon. Russia didn't need to prove whether the Su-57 was good or not. Simply keeping it intact was enough to maintain the narrative of a superfighter waiting for its moment. On April 25, 2026, Ukraine shattered that entire calculation in a single night. The Su-57s were destroyed right in the apron at Chelyabinsk. Satellite images confirmed it. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed it. And Russia stayed silent. But what matters more than what was destroyed is what this event just revealed. First, Ukraine has just proven it has the capability to conduct precise strikes at a range of 1,700 kilometers, a threshold no one previously thought possible. Second, after more than 2 decades of propaganda, the Su-57 has just been confronted with a question that Russia has no good answer for, no matter which direction you look at it. Third, this is not just news about Ukraine and Russia. This is a strategic lesson that Middle Eastern nations considering contracts to buy the Su-57 and major powers redefining their defense doctrines in the drone era are having to deal with right now. Let's begin. On April 25, 2026, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces attacked the Shegel military airfield in Chelyabinsk province in the southern Urals. By May 1, the Ukrainian General Staff confirmed the results on its official Facebook page. The results of measures to reduce the enemy's ability to attack civilian targets have been confirmed. No rhetoric, no boasting. Just a factual statement, as if destroying Russia's fifth-generation fighters 1,700 kilometers from the border was just another routine task of the day. Also on May 1, Commander Robert Magyar Brovdi of the Unmanned Systems Forces released full details. At least 3 long-range strike weapons hit the airfield, confirming damage to 2 Su-57 fighters, 1 Su-34 bomber, and 1 unidentified Sukhoi aircraft, a total of 4 aircraft in one night. But the numbers are not the most noteworthy part. The most noteworthy part is what satellite images revealed afterward. The ground service vehicle parked right between the 2 Su-57s was also completely destroyed. That was not random. That was proof of the strike's precision. Ukraine did not just hit the airfield area, they hit the exact spot, the exact targets, from a distance Russia thought was unreachable. The Telegram channel Excelenova Plus was one of the first sources to publish comparative satellite images from April 17 and April 26, 2026. 2 photos of the same parking area, before and after the attack, and the difference between them left no doubt. Defense Blog confirmed the images were fully consistent with Ukraine's claims. On the Russian side, the response was selective silence. The Russian Ministry of Defense only briefly confirmed that Ukrainian drones had attacked Chelyabinsk province on April 25, with no further comment, no denial, no explanation. That is the kind of silence people choose when they have no good answer to give. Financially, just counting the aircraft, the damage was at least over $235 million. Each Su-57 costs between $100 and $120 million. Each Su-34 between $35 and $50 million, not counting ground infrastructure, service vehicles, and other collateral damage. But to understand why that number matters, you need to understand where Chelyabinsk is and why Russia chose that location. Chelyabinsk is not a frontline base. It is a key defense industrial region in the southern Urals, closer to Kazakhstan than to Ukraine, approximately 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, or more than 1,056 miles. The Shegel airfield here was chosen by Russia as the main maintenance and pilot training center for the Su-57 precisely for that reason, distance. Not because it was the best operational location tactically, but because Russia believed no threat could reach it. In March 2026, Russian Security Council Secretary Shoigu himself confirmed that logic when he warned. Until recently, the Urals region was still beyond Ukraine's range, but the speed of development of Ukrainian drone systems is changing that. The Urals are now in the direct danger zone. That warning was given in March. Chagall was attacked in April. The distance from Chelyabinsk to the Ukrainian border did not change, but Ukraine's reach did. And to understand how big that change is, we need to look back at what happened before Chelyabinsk. In June 2024, Ukraine conducted its first direct attack on a Su-57 at the Oktyabinsk base in Astrakhan province, about 460 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The aircraft was damaged but repaired and returned to service. Ukraine did not repeat that mistake at Chelyabinsk. At least 1 Su-57 was completely destroyed beyond recovery. Also in June 2024, Operation Spiderweb proved another capability. Ukraine simultaneously attacked 4 air bases deep inside Russian territory, damaging 41 aircraft, using drones hidden in trucks and deployed from multiple positions inside Russia itself. In August 2024, the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, a unit completely separate from the unmanned systems forces, attacked and downed 5 Russian fighters in a single night, showing that long-range strike strategy was not the capability of one unit, but of the entire Ukrainian intelligence military system. In December 2025, at the Lipetsk base in southwestern Russia, a partisan group operating for the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, GUR, destroyed 2 Su-30 fighters after 2 weeks of planning. Russia tried to attribute the incident to a fire of unknown cause. No one believed it. And now Chelyabinsk, 3.5 times the distance of Aktybinsk, crossing the entire Ural range, striking the exact place Russia thought was safest. This is not linear escalation. This is an entirely new threshold. To understand why what happened at Chelyabinsk matters so much, you need to understand how Russia has built the story of the Su-57 over the past 2 decades. The Su-57, or Felon according to NATO designation, is the most ambitious fighter program in the history of modern Russian military aviation. Russia positioned it not just as a fighter jet, but as a declaration, proof that Russia can still compete on equal terms with the United States in the highest-end military technology. The United Aircraft Corporation promotes the Su-57 as a 5th-generation fighter capable of striking air, ground, and sea targets in all-weather conditions at any time, promotional language that is almost a direct copy of how America describes the F-22 and F-35, and that is no coincidence. On the published technical specifications, the Su-57 is genuinely impressive on paper. Maximum speed of Mach 2, supercruise capability at Mach 1.3, weapons payload up to 10,000 kilograms, equipped with R-77M active radar-guided missiles for long-range engagements and R-74M2 infrared-guided missiles for close range, and capable of carrying precision-guided bombs similar to those Russia is using to strike Ukraine. But there is one detail in the program's history that few have paid proper attention to. The Su-57 made its first flight in 2010, but it took another 10 years, until 2020, before it was officially commissioned into the Russian military. The 10 years between first flight and entry into service were not a normal process. That was the first and clearest sign that something was wrong with the program. Now, to be fair, the Su-57 does have real strengths that should not be completely dismissed. Its operational range is around 3,500 kilometers, significantly superior to the F-35's roughly 2,200 kilometers. Thrust vectoring engines give it excellent maneuverability in close-range air combat, an area where Russian design philosophy has always prioritized. The Su-57's IRST, Infrared Search and Track System, is rated to detect F-22 and F-35 from 150 to 200 kilometers, a capability the American fighters themselves do not possess. And importantly, it must be understood that the Su-57 was designed for Russia's air defense doctrine: interception, protection of territory, not for deep offensive strikes into enemy territory like the F-35. Those are 2 different philosophies, and direct comparisons are sometimes not entirely fair. However, all those strengths become less meaningful when placed against an undeniable reality. After more than 15 years of development, as of the end of 2023, Russia had only 21 serially produced Su-57s in service, and even counting deliveries in 2024 and 2025, the total still does not exceed 30 operational aircraft. That is an extremely small fleet for a program that has received tens of billions of dollars in investment over 2 decades. And in that context, every Su-57 destroyed is not a loss that can be replaced in a few months. It is an irreplaceable loss in the short term, both militarily and in terms of propaganda. But Chelyabinsk is not just a story about the Su-57. The Su-34 destroyed in the same attack also carries its own strategic significance, and to understand why, we need to look back at the early months of the war. When Russia launched the full-scale invasion in 2022, the Russian Air Force flew into Ukrainian airspace expecting to quickly overwhelm enemy air defenses. The result was a disaster. Russia lost around 200 aircraft in the first months, a loss rate no air force could sustain. That lesson forced Russia to completely change its tactics, and the Su-34 became central to that new tactic. Instead of flying into Ukrainian airspace, Su-34s now operate on a different formula, launching UMPK and UMPB guided bombs from distances up to 1,000 kilometers, completely outside the range of Ukrainian air defenses, targeting cities, infrastructure, and military positions with enough accuracy to cause large-scale damage without taking direct risk. Those bombs are literally devastating Ukraine. Commander Bravdy himself spoke bluntly about this. Every Su-34 destroyed means fewer airstrikes, fewer civilian casualties, and less pressure on Ukraine's entire air defense system. Destroying a Su-34 at Chelyabinsk was not just material damage, It was cutting off a guided bomb delivery vehicle before it could be put into use, before it could cause further damage on Ukrainian territory. But the story of the Su-57's real value did not begin at Chelyabinsk. It began with a decision made in New Delhi in April 2018, and to understand why that decision matters more than any Russian technical claim, you need to understand who India is in this story. India is not a NATO country with political reasons to criticize Russian weapons. India is a longtime Russian defense partner, a country operating hundreds of Russian fighter jets, a country with sufficient technical capability to evaluate a weapons system from the inside, not from the outside through exhibition photos. In 2010, at the same time the Su-57 made its first flight, India signed an agreement to jointly develop the FGFA, fifth-generation fighter aircraft, with Russia, committing $6 billion and expecting a real fifth-generation fighter that could compete with what the West was developing. In 2016 and 2017, tensions began to build. The Su-57 did not meet the standards India expected from a true fifth-generation fighter. Stealth capability was insufficient, engines were old and unreliable. Russia kept delaying technology transfer, refused to install India-produced AESA radar as requested, prolonged disputes over cost sharing, and the Su-57's own integrated radar also showed problems. In April 2018, India withdrew from the FGFA program, not because of lack of money, not because of Western political pressure, but because after 8 years of working directly with the program, their conclusion was that the Su-57 was not a true fifth-generation fighter by any serious technical definition. The story could have ended there, but Russia did not give up. From 2025 to early 2026, Russia kept returning to offer India increasingly attractive packages. The new Is-30 engine, replacing the old one that was one of the most criticized weaknesses, the Su-57E variant with more technology transfer, discounted pricing around $35 to $40 million per aircraft, significantly cheaper than the F-35, even proposing a license-built variant fully customized to India's specific requirements. In March 2026, India refused for the final time. The reason remained the same. The Su-57 has not met true fifth-generation standards. And instead of turning to Russia, India chose to develop its own AMSA, indigenous fifth-generation fighter program, while leaning toward joining Tempest or FAS, the two sixth-generation fighter programs led by Britain, Italy, Japan, Germany, France, and Spain, countries that Russia considers adversaries in this war. Notice that again. India, a longtime Russian defense partner, rejected the Su-57 twice in 8 years, even as Russia continually sweetened the offer, and ultimately shifted toward linking up with sixth-generation programs from Russia's Western adversaries. That is not criticism from a hostile nation. That is a verdict from an insider, and it says far more than any catalog specification. But if India's verdict is qualitative evidence, then the technical numbers are quantitative evidence, and they do not speak any better. The Su-57's radar cross-section, RCS, is estimated at 0.1 to 0.5 square meters. The F-35's is 0.0015 to 0.005 square meters. That means enemy radars can detect the Su-57 from 6 to 10 times the distance they can detect the F-35, not twice, not 3 times, but 6 to 10 times. In real combat environments, that distance is the difference between shooting first and being shot first. And to illustrate the Su-57 stealth problem in a way that cannot be denied, recall what happened at the Zhuhai Airshow show in 2024. Chinese observers and military bloggers themselves, not the West, not NATO, but China, a country with political reasons to support Russia, publicly pointed out poorly fitted panel seams on the airframe, exposed screws on the surface, and weapons bay doors that did not close completely. These were not defects that required radar or special equipment to detect. These were issues visible to the naked eye at a public exhibition, directly contradicting claims of true stealth. The production numbers tell the same story. In the same roughly 15 years of production, the F-35 has delivered more than 1,100 aircraft to American and Allied air forces around the world, while Russia's Su-57 has fewer than 30 operational aircraft. That gap reflects not only differences in economic scale, but also differences in industrial capability and program reliability. On the export market, the picture is no brighter. Algeria is the first and only confirmed export customer, signing a contract in 2019, receiving the first 2 aircraft in November 2025, with a total order of 12 to 14 aircraft. In February 2026, Russian Trade Minister Alikhanov announced at the Inaprom exhibition in Saudi Arabia that Russia had signed Su-57 export contracts with Middle Eastern customers, but no customer names, no specific numbers, no verifiable details. In April 2026, Rosoboronexport continued claiming additional contracts signed at the DSA 2026 exhibition in Kuala Lumpur. The customer list is expanding, they said, but still no specific confirmed names. This is a familiar pattern. Vague export claims made at international exhibitions to create a sense of momentum, not to confirm reality. And the context of those claims needs to be placed against a more important number. Russian arms exports have dropped 92% from 2021 to 2024, as all production capacity was redirected to the war in Ukraine, pulling Russia from second to third place in the global arms export ranking, overtaken by France. But there is no clearer or more convincing evidence of the Su-57's real value than the simplest strategic question that no one in Moscow can answer satisfactorily. Why has the Su-57 not been deployed in Ukraine? Ukraine does not have F-35s. Ukraine does not have overwhelming air defenses. Ukraine does not have the world's most advanced stealth radars. If the Su-57 is truly a fifth-generation fighter with stealth capability, superior speed, and powerful firepower as Russia claims, then this is exactly the combat environment it was designed to dominate. But instead of flying over Ukrainian skies, the Su-57 is hidden in Chelyabinsk, performing maintenance and training duties more than 1,700 kilometers from the battlefield. Compare that to what happened in February 2026 during Operation Epic Fury in Iran. America deployed the F-35 into real combat, penetrating Iranian air defenses, a system partially equipped with Russian technology, including Russian radars and surface-to-air missiles, and the F-35 carried out its mission. Russia hides the Su-57 while America sends the F-35 into combat. The conclusion from that contrast needs no further interpretation. Russia does not deploy the Su-57 because it lacks confidence in its ability to survive in real combat conditions, and because losing one aircraft in a fleet of fewer than 30 at a cost of $100 to $120 million each is an unacceptable risk both militarily and in terms of propaganda. Chelyabinsk did not just destroy an aircraft. It destroyed the strategic ambiguity Russia had maintained for years around this program. But the question after Chelyabinsk is how Ukraine managed to do it. And to answer that, we need to look back at the entire journey Ukraine has taken to reach this threshold, because Chelyabinsk was not a sudden leap, it was the destination of a systematic escalation process, step by step. When the war began in 2022, Ukraine's attack drones mainly operated at short to medium range, focused near the front lines, used more for reconnaissance and tactical strikes than deep attacks. No one at that time predicted that in less than 4 years, Ukraine would strike precisely at an airbase 700 kilometers from its border. On June 1, 2024, Operation Spark marked the first major leap in scale and method. Ukraine simultaneously attacked 4 air bases deep inside Russian territory, damaging 41 aircraft in a single operation, not by launching drones from Ukrainian territory, but by hiding them in trucks and deploying them from multiple positions inside Russia itself, a tactical advance no less significant than the range. Also in June 2024, the Su-57 was attacked for the first time at Chelyabinsk, about 460 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The aircraft was damaged but repaired and returned to service, and Russia quietly moved its Su-57 fleet even farther away, believing greater distance would solve the problem. In August 2024, the SBU, the Security Service of Ukraine, completely independent of the unmanned systems forces, attacked and disabled 5 Russian fighters in a single night, confirming that long-range strike strategy was not the capability of a single unit, but of the entire Ukrainian intelligence military system operating in parallel. In December 2025, at Lipetsk in southwestern Russia, a partisan group operating under the coordination of the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, GUR, planned for 2 weeks and destroyed 2 Su-30 fighters right at the domestic base. Russia tried to attribute the incident to a fire of unknown cause, but no one believed it. In February 2026, the SBU attacked the Yukta oil refinery in the Komi Republic, about 1,750 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The first time Ukraine publicly confirmed an attack beyond 1,700 kilometers before Chelyabinsk occurred, and that number should have been the clearest signal for Russia to worry about Shaigal's safety. Then in early 2026, another milestone was confirmed. For the first time in the entire war, Ukraine surpassed Russia in the number of long-range attack drones launched. Ukraine, the defending country, was producing and deploying more long-range attack drones than Russia. And on April 25, 2026, all those escalation steps converged at Chelyabinsk. Bloomberg confirmed that on the same day Yekaterinburg, a city of more than 1.5 million people near Chelyabinsk in the Urals, was also attacked for the first time since the war began, and Yekaterinburg airport had to close 5 times in April alone due to drone threats. This is no longer isolated strikes on distant targets. This is continuous systematic pressure on Russia's most important industrial region. As for what weapon Ukraine used at Chelyabinsk, the short answer is, Ukraine is not saying, and that is entirely a deliberate strategic decision. Flamingo, A hybrid drone missile system with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and a 1,000-kilogram warhead is theoretically sufficient in range and destructive power. But satellite images from Chagall do not show the large craters a 1,000-kilogram warhead would leave. So this possibility can be ruled out, or at least remains uncertain. Precedents from Operation Spiderweb and Lipetsk show that combining domestic partisans with drones launched from inside Russian territory is entirely real and has been proven. Ukraine has also confirmed that its drones can reach over 2,000 kilometers. Chelyabinsk at Y700 kilometers is within that range, but no specific model has been publicly disclosed so far. The most realistic possibility is a combination: precise intelligence targeting, new generation long-range drones, possibly a domestic Russian element, coordinated in a way that Ukraine has no reason to explain publicly. Why give up the element of surprise when that method can be used again at another time against another target, in a way Russia still has not found an effective answer for? And the final point that needs emphasis about Chelyabinsk is that Chagall is not just an airfield. Chelyabinsk is the defense industrial capital of the Urals, where tanks, heavy equipment, and numerous facilities sustaining Russia's war machine have been produced for decades. Before April 25, Russia believed the entire region was completely safe because of distance, and Chagall was chosen precisely because of that belief. Military Watch magazine bluntly assessed that the vulnerability of targets in Chelyabinsk raises serious questions about Russia's ability to protect its industrial facilities, not just the airfield, but the entire war production infrastructure in the region. Russia's response: Dmitry Medvedev declared that European facilities involved in producing drones for Ukraine could be considered potential Russian targets. That is a response of threats, not effective action, not specific defensive solutions, not an answer to how to protect the rest of the Su-57 fleet that increasingly has nowhere far enough to hide. Chelyabinsk has placed Russia in front of a problem with no good solution, and that matters more than any damage figure. Look at the structure of the situation Russia is facing. If the Su-57 is truly as good as everything Russia has claimed for 2 decades, if this is really a world-class 5th-generation fighter with irreplaceable strategic value, then it means Russia has managed an asset worth over $100 million each so carelessly that it cannot be justified, leaving them parked in the open at a base without adequate defenses, in a region that Russia's own Security Council secretary had publicly warned was becoming a danger zone just weeks before the attack, and then having no effective defensive response to prevent the damage. That is a failure of strategic asset protection at a level that cannot be explained if the asset has the value claimed. But if we follow the other branch, if the Su-57 is not actually as good as claimed, if what India rejected twice, what Chinese observers pointed out at Zhuhai, and what the RCS figures reveal are all correct, then it means 20 years of propaganda, tens of billions of dollars invested, and a program built with the goal of challenging Western air superiority have not achieved what it was promised to do. That is a technological and industrial failure on a national scale. There is no third branch. Both branches lead to the same strategic outcome. The Su-57 program has just lost the most important thing any weapons program can possess: deterrence through ambiguity. For many years, no one knew for sure whether the Su-57 was truly as good as claimed, and that uncertainty itself had strategic value. Chelyabinsk has erased that ambiguity. And on the question of what Russia will do next with the remaining Su-57 fleet, there is no good answer here. Disperse them to different bases across Russia. Each new location requires its own defense systems, its own logistics, and more importantly, needs to be far enough that Ukraine cannot reach it. But Chelyabinsk has just proven that Russia's definition of far enough no longer holds. Continue keeping them concentrated at one base. Chagall has just proven that is not safe. Every decision Russia makes from now on about the Su-57 fleet will come from a defensive position, not a proactive strategic one. But the consequences of Chelyabinsk do not stop at Russia's borders. Look at Algeria, the country that just received its first 2 Su-57s in November 2025, the first and only confirmed export customer of the program, which signed a total contract for 12 to 14 aircraft. The ink on the contract is barely dry. The aircraft have not yet been fully integrated into combat training. And Algeria is already facing the question no weapons seller wants its customers to ask: is what I just bought truly as valuable as what was sold to me? Then there are the Middle Eastern customers that Russian Trade Minister Ali Khanov claimed had signed contracts in February 2026 at the Inaprom exhibition in Saudi Arabia. Names not disclosed, contracts with no specific details. Those countries, whoever they are now looking at the satellite images from a completely different perspective than 2 months ago. India rejected the Su-57 before Chelyabinsk happened, and with each day after an event, that decision looks increasingly correct. In that context, Chelyabinsk must be placed in the broader global trend of which it is a part, because what Ukraine has just done is not an isolated phenomenon. It is the clearest manifestation of a doctrinal shift happening simultaneously across multiple battlefields. Ukraine is rewriting a rule that was once considered immutable in modern military thinking. To neutralize an opponent's air force, you do not necessarily need manned aircraft. You need long-range drones, precise intelligence, and strategic patience. The cost asymmetry in that equation is entirely unfavorable to the defender. A Su-57 worth $100 to $120 million destroyed by a strike weapon costing a small fraction of that. And Russia does not have the ability to replace Su-57s at the rate Ukraine can continue attacking. The same trend is playing out in parallel on the Iranian battlefield. In Operation Epic Fury in February 2026, America deployed the new PRSM, long-range ballistic missile launched from existing HIMARS launchers with a 500-kilometer range, combined with the Lucas drone, a one-way attack system costing only $35,000 each, built from Iranian Shahed technology and turned against its creator, and the Black Tomahawk, the stealth variant of the proven cruise missile with radar-absorbing coating that made Iranian air defenses unable to detect it until too late. 3 different systems, 3 different battlefields, but the same core logic. Precision long-range weapons with asymmetric costs are erasing the geographic advantages that were once the foundation of every defense strategy. The meaning of that extends beyond Ukraine and Iran. Every country with important military bases located deep inland, from Middle Eastern nations building air forces, to Southeast Asian countries modernizing defense, to Northeast Asian powers watching every development in this war, all are having to deal with the same inescapable question that Chelyabinsk has just posed. If distance is no longer a reliable shield, then the definition of safe zone needs to be rewritten from scratch, and the cost to protect an important strategic asset in the era of long-range drones compared to the cost of building that asset in the first place. So what happens next? For Russia's remaining Su-57 fleet, there are no good choices. Dispersing them farther does not solve the problem. Chelyabinsk was already on the eastern edge of the Urals, closer to Kazakhstan than Ukraine, and it was still attacked. If Russia continues pushing the Su-57 farther east or north, each such move is not a strategic solution. It is a public admission that there is no place on Russian territory safe enough to protect them from Ukraine. And each such admission further erodes the deterrence of a program Russia spent 2 decades building. On the Ukrainian side, the question is not whether they will continue, but in which direction. Chelyabinsk is not the end of a campaign. It is a test of capability for a much longer campaign. If Ukraine can strike precisely at Chagall at 700 kilometers, then the entire Ural defense industrial cluster, tank factories, ammunition production facilities, war logistics centers that Russia relied on, because it believed distance was the best shield, all lie within range of the same capability. The bigger question that no one can answer with certainty right now is whether Chelyabinsk is the peak of what Ukraine can do, or only the starting point of a longer campaign targeting the very infrastructure that generates Russia's war power, not the battlefield, but the industry behind the battlefield. And the global signal from all of this, placed alongside Operation Epic Fury in Iran, alongside the development of Lucas drones and Black Tomahawk and PRSM, is clear. The era in which geographic distance protects important military facilities is ending. Not just for Russia, not just in Europe, but for any nation still building its defense strategy on the assumption that far enough is safe enough. That assumption no longer holds. Chelyabinsk is the proof. And here are the 3 things the event of April 25, 2026 has proven at the same time, in an undeniable way. First, Ukraine has erased the concept of a safe zone on Russian territory. With sign 700 kilometers is no longer a shield, and no other number will replace it in Russia's strategic thinking from today onward. Second, the Su-57 has just lost the most important thing any weapons program can possess, deterrence through ambiguity, and no matter which way Russia chooses to explain this event, whether following the branch that the Su-57 is good or the Su-57 is not good, the strategic outcome is the same. Russia loses the argument. Third, long-range attack drones with asymmetric costs are rewriting global military doctrine in real time. Not in theoretical reports, not in military academy lectures, but in satellite images, in official statements, and in the weapons procurement decisions that nations around the world are having to make right now based on what they are witnessing. Everyone is watching. If you want to continue following along with us, analyses that do not stop at surface news but go into the strategic logic behind each event, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There is still a lot more to come.